Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhu Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedya Dravidam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Yata Sarvani Bhutani Pratibhanti Stitani Cha Yatraivo Pashamam Yanti Tasvai Satyatmane Namaha. So where are we in our text?
We're starting chapter 31 on page 329. Sorry, 325.
325. Help us out, please, Puneet.
Ekatrincha Sargaha, chapter 31. Bhumika Jayaha, the conquest of the steppes. Section 1, Chitta Nashaha, the destruction of thought. Sri Rama Vacha, Evam Sthite hi Bhagavan, Jivan Muktasya Sanmate, Apurvatishaya Kosao, Bhavatyatmam Vidamvara. Sri Rama said, revered sage, best among knowers of the South, what is that singular excellence of the noble-minded one, liberated while living, when he is established thus?
And good question. Let's see what the answer is.
Vasishtha Vacha, Nitya Tripta Prashantatma, Sa Atmanyeva Tishtati, Mantra Tantra Tapa Siddhaihi, Sampraptam Animaghyapi, Kritam Akashayanadi, Katatra Syat Apurvata, Yatnat Tat Sadhitam Taistu, Netarenat Madarshina. Vasishtha said, perpetually satisfied and with a calm mind, she abides only in the South. Even supernatural powers like Animan, or becoming as small as an atom, are obtained by those accomplished in mantras or potent and sacred words, tantras or mystical disciplines, and tapas or penance, and feats such as walking in the sky performed. What could be the singularity in such feats? That has been achieved by them through the necessary effort, not by any other capable of revealing the self.
So, again, echoing that wonderful mantra, not mantra, sutra, not Jim, shloka in Gita. in chapter 2. When a person casts off all the desires of the mind and is satisfied in the self by the self, then they're said to be a person of steady wisdom. Sthita prajna purusha. This is the mark of the person of steady wisdom. Not siddhis. The acquisition of siddhis is possible. It is the result of various mental and physical austerities. Fundamentally no different than going to the gym. So we can get confused. We can see someone who may have all sorts of powers. They may have a lot of charisma. We have to be very careful not to confuse charisma, someone with a lot of power, with that profound emptiness of the person of steady wisdom. So siddhis in and of themselves are only the result of mental austerities. They're available, just like doing well in the stock market, just like being a magnate in real estate, just like any other worldly accomplishment. Now, some Mahatmas, upon realization, exhibit siddhis. It is not a function of the realization. It's the function of tapas done in other lifetimes, or maybe in this lifetime earlier. And in and of themselves, they're nothing. Swami Tapovanam says, so you want to fly through the air. A bird can do that. You want to stand on one leg in Vrikshasana for hours and hours and hours. A tree can do that. You're going to go into the cold Ganga up to your neck. Stay there for days. A stone can do that. The only accomplishment worth having is peace of mind. Peace of mind is the result of knowledge of yourself. That is the mark of the Jivan Mukta. Any questions about this? Now, if you're drawn to get powers, knock yourself out. You may be drawn to buy a house too. I mean, it's just another worldly endeavor. It's neither good, neither bad. It isn't evil. It's just trinkets and baubles, colored glass, not Chintamani, the great wish-fulfilling gem, which is knowledge of the self. And you could be a knower of Brahman and not exhibit any fantastic powers. Other than your mind is sthita, kutusta, immovable. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
एष एव विशेषोऽस्य न समो मूढबुद्धिभिः सर्वत्रास्थापरित्यागात् निरागम् अमलं मनः. This alone is his peculiarity. He is not equal to people with dull intelligence. By the complete renunciation of prop or support everywhere, his mind is devoid of passion and stainless.
So the person of steady wisdom does not depend on any person, place, thing, situation, or even mind state for their peace of mind. How? When you give up believing in the reality of the mind is seen to be nowhere. It's nothing. It's just imagination. And this means even our precious thoughts. Oh, I believe in nonviolence. That's real. It's just another thought. In the scheme of things, at the empirical level, better you should be nonviolent, violent. But which is more real? A very pleasant dream or a violent dream? Oh, any thoughts on this? Next one.
यथा सत्वम् उपेक्ष्य स्वं शनैः विप्रो दुरीहया अङ्गीकरोति शूद्रत्वं तथा जीवत्वम् ईश्वरः. As a Brahmana, on account of bad activity or desire, having neglected his quality of sattva or purity, knowledge, and harmony, slowly accepts or attains to the state of a Shudra, so does the Lord attain to Jivahood, or the state of the individual soul, on account of association with the gunas or the qualities or powers of nature.
So this is an interesting verse. Remember in Gita, Krishna says, I am the author of the fourfold varnas, castes. A lot of people in this social justice say, Gita's bad, it's terrible, it's classist, blah, 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 blah. But they don't pay attention to the rest of the shloka, where Gita says, according to guna and karma. Nowhere does it say janma. So, what Gita has said is that society tends to form itself into these four great, equally important endeavors of humanity. There are those who are the scholars, who are the keepers of the cultural traditions. We would call them Brahmanas. There are those who have a propensity to fight for justice. It is their particular propensity to protect, to serve, to ensure justice and peace. There are those who are attracted to the production and the distribution of goods and services. Many, many, many of us. Those are merchant class. Then there are those who work with their hands. They don't want to go to college. There's a big thing going on now in the United States. Saying everybody ought to have access to a college education. And then we find there are some young people, I don't want to go to college. I'd rather learn how to be an electrician. This is what I want to do. These are the workers. And Gita does not say one is more important than the other. It's like the human body, which is more important, your nose or your toes? They're all important. And society would not work without all of them. As it has become jati or janma, but you're born into a caste, which is contrary to what Gita says. You then think that you are an aristocrat if you are born into a particular varna. So you may be able to trace your lineage back to some ancient rishi. You may have the sacred thread to your Gayatri mantra. But if you spend your time in the marketplace, you're a merchant. Likewise, you may come from what society would say is a low birth, but you have a yearning for self-realization. You study the scriptures, you surrender to a guru, and you are a Brahman. Any thoughts on this? So the import of the scripture here is by our thoughts and our actions, that determines our station in life, not our birth. So in terms of whether or not you're a gentleman or a gentlewoman, doesn't mean in Western culture that you're the son of a count or an earl or a baron. A gentleman is one who always makes another appear at their best. That's the mark of a gentleman or a gentlewoman. Not someone who lords over others. So even someone who may have been introduced to the Vedanta when they're young, may have even had some deep spiritual experience. But then somehow neglects this, dives into the world, becomes what we call a fallen yogi. It's not instant. It's all from our own thoughts and actions. Any thoughts on this? I can remember a camp up in Krishnalaya. Oh God, we're going 30 some years ago now. And in those days when Swamiji was there doing a camp, they would hire local people to help with the kitchen work, preparing the meals and doing some of the housekeeping and stuff like that. And there was a community of Hare Krishna people who were there. And there was this delightful woman, a Westerner, who was in the Hare Krishna tradition, and she was working in the kitchen. And the custom at a Chinmaya camp is if you were there and paid staff, you could go to any of the lectures or anything for free. You know, it was there for all. And so someone said to this woman, do you want to go hear Swamiji's lectures? And she says, oh no, I can't. Women aren't allowed to hear the Vedanta. Did you ever get any of that as a kid? It's nonsense. Nonsense. All this stuff comes, keeps people away from truth. Next verse.
Akaranam upayanti sarve jiva parat padat paschat tesham swakarmani karanam sukha dukkhayoh. All living beings arrive without cause from the supreme abode. Then their own actions become the cause of their happiness and sorrow.
So, the locus of Maya is Brahman. It is the nature of consciousness to have the phenomenal universe arise in it. In the phenomenal universe arises things and beings. That's the cause. But once we get to the human realm, well, probably even before that, when we become sentient beings, it is our choices, our actions, and the inevitable reactions that become the cause of things. Now, I want to nuance this. Karma is not siloed. Isn't that the term they use in like the military and business, where you have your own particular thing and there's no communication with other departments? Is that right?
Yes.
Karma is not siloed. Karma is not only the force of my past, but as that interacts with the society. So, for example, did you guys buy gasoline in the past week?
I think so.
How much did you pay?
It's like $4.99 or something.
Yeah, that's expensive. Is that your karma? Or is that what's happening with the economy? There could be someone who's an enlightened sage living right next door, and gas is still $4.99. So there's an interplay in larger modes of karma that at the level of the equipment we participate in. Any thoughts on this?
Where does Swadharma come?
Swadharma is a function of my karma. Swadharma means the law of my individual being, the exoteric definition of it. These are the things that Brahman is supposed to do. These are the things Kshatriya is supposed to do. These are the things that Vaishya is supposed to do. These are things that Shudra is supposed to do. You know, if you're a good Shudra, your Swadharma is to serve the Brahmins. You know, that's not the deeper understanding of it. It means through millions of lifetimes, you've come into this life with a collection of karmic impressions, your vasanas, that impel you into experience and activities. And it's unique. I like to use the example of a snowflake. All snowflakes are water. Sarvam kalvidam brahma, all this stuff. But you, Saundarya, at this very moment, are like a snowflake. Every single snowflake is unique. No two snowflakes have a crystal structure that is exactly like another. You're a scientist. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how does that come about? You have had a unique series of experiences, actions, and reactions, lifetimes as somebody. Now, where we get into trouble, you look to someone else. Oh, they have a really great life. I want to be like them. I'm sorry, they're taken. You can't be them. You can only be you. What's your Swadharma? What you find yourself doing? Ride the horse in the direction it's going. There's an old story. So in old-timey days in India, the farmers would fertilize the fields with night soil. You know, they would collect their poop, put it on the fields. This one farmer, I don't want to handle my shit. So what did he do? He went to the next village and bought somebody else's poop to put on his field. That's the person who's unwilling to live life on life's terms with the life. Don't try to be or live somebody else's life. Now, how do I find out what my Swadharma is? The first thing we have to do is remove what the psychologists call superego. Superego are the voices, the impressions, the pressures that come from the outside, the sense of external obligation. This is what good Indian girls always do. This is what my parents say I need to do in order to be happy or successful. This is what all my friends are doing. This is what is going to make me have esteem in the society, etc. All of that stuff we have to get rid of. This can be boiled down to those screaming trumpets of raga and dvesha in our ears. I must have it this way. I'll never have it that way. So we have to attain to yoga rudha, mount the steed of the mind, and not be at the effect of those voices. And in the Hebrew scripture, the prophet Isaiah has this term, the still small voice, my heart's desire. Or as Joseph Campbell would say, follow your bliss. You know you're on the current of life, following your swadharma. You have joy in what you're doing. I like to say, trust your goosebumps. Now, not everybody's life is always goosebumps. Every life gets its allotted dose of joys and sorrows. But fundamentally, it isn't going to be any different if you don't use your own shit to fertilize the field of bodhi, and you try to get somebody else's life to do it. Is that useful? And how do I know I'm living contrary to my swadharma? If you get up in the morning and you go to work and you hate your job, and it's a burden, and it's an effort, the first thing you do when you get home is pour yourself a cocktail or 2 or 10 to deal with how unhappy you are. Or if in your relationship, I was actually talking with a woman who's got 3 kids. She says, I hate my husband, but I feel trapped. I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. He's not a bad person. I just hate him. Oh, she got a lot of work to do. I don't know if she ever loved him. It's something for her to figure out. She's got a lot of work to do. But whatever's going on, it's not how we're meant to live. It's never the will of God for you to be miserable. You're being punished for being so awful in a prior life. Nonsense. You can have peace of mind, joy in life, no matter what the circumstances are. And if you're discontent with your life, then there's never enough. No amount of zeros in your pocketbook, in your paycheck, will make you happy if you're fundamentally discontent, and even more important, fearful. That's another great lie of this world. More zeros in the paycheck will get rid of the fear of financial insecurity. Gita Krishna says no one's more fearful than a wealthy person. You get enough money, then you're going to be afraid everybody's out to get a piece of it. Any of you know any really wealthy people? They're always on guard. Someone's going to work an angle on them. They just start from a position of not trusting the goodwill of anybody. Anybody. Fascinating. Was that useful?
Yes.
Any other questions on it? But the hard part for all of us, I've got my life and I'm happy. And then I look over there. They're happier than I am because they've got this, that, and the other thing. I want what they got. I think that's the answer. You can't have their life. It's taken. They're doing their life. And it's never about the having. It's always about the doing. Swadharma is always about doing, not about having. It's not the title. It's the work. It's all we get in life. Thy right is to work alone, never to its fruits. That's what Krishna says. You better enjoy what you're doing. That's all you get. Good question. Next verse.
Atma jnanat samutpanna sankalpa karma karanam sankalpitvam hi bandhasya karanam tat parityaja. Imagination or desire that is born out of ignorance of the self is the cause of action. The state of thinking or ideation is indeed the cause of bondage. Renounce that.
So this is subtle. So it's this idea of yearning. He uses the word sankalpa. Wish, will, desire, intention. Sankalpa can have a neutral definition, but in this context, it has the definition of I want, I need, I've got to have. So I call it when the mind is under the influence of I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. I'm unhappy, and the cause of my unhappiness is I'm not getting what I want. I think it's so funny because I have friends who are in psychotherapy or they've studied psychology and stuff like that. And you hear this phrase, I'm not getting my needs met. Any of you heard that one? I'll tell you what your needs are: food, clothing, and shelter. Everything else is a desire. When I say I'm not getting my needs met, meaning I have desires that I'm going to label needs so that I can not have to deal with them as klesha. I didn't get a manicure. I'm not getting my needs met. Nonsense. That's a very simple thing. Many of us will look at other parts of our life. I have to have that in order to be happy. That's not true. It's not true. If your body is injured or you're very ill, that's a need. And if you're a yogi, even that can be transcended. If you're at the effect of the elements, you're cold, you're outside, those are needs. Food, if you're starving, that's a need. And we see in all sorts of circumstances people having enormous capacity to endure that stuff. You know, if you go on YouTube and some of these interviews of like the volunteers in the Ukrainian army, somebody's a school teacher. January of last year, and today they're in a trench outside of Bakhmut. Mud, cold, no water to bathe in, fighting to protect their homeland. Committed. Their idea of what their needs are is very, very different. And what happens? It is vasana pressure. The more intense the vasana pressure, the more discomfort I have in my mind. I'm restless, I'm discontent. And that impels me into action, Varitavya. Action in and of itself is not problematic. It's ego prompted action. I must do this, I must have that. I won't be happy. My partner must behave a certain way. The boss must behave a certain way. I have to have so much money saved. I have to drive this kind of car, or I won't be happy. Work. And then what's the end result? Krodha. I run around angry all the time. This low level discontent. I'm annoyed with the world because it's not meeting my expectations. That's the way foolish people live. And there's a bit of the Buddha in all of us, perhaps. Any thoughts on this? Now listen very carefully. In the end, desire is not an impediment to self-realization. If it is an expressive desire, if it is a creative desire, if it's an inspired desire and the action that follows from it, and Paramavairagya, you are Dhyani, completely let go your attachment. All right, next verse.
Nisankalpastu mokshasya tadvyasam dhiya kuru. The absence of thinking or ideation is the cause of liberation. Practice that with your intellect or understanding. There's a note. The word sankalpa in verses 7 and 8 refer to willing, desire, thought, imagination, or ideation. That is the primary cause of the veiling of the self, which is pure consciousness.
So thought going by is not necessarily problematic. And you couldn't function in the world without some sense of sankalpa. And we've had all sorts of teachings about how the yogi begins to have intentional sankalpa. but it's very different if your well-being or your happiness is rooted in that. So, in Dante's Inferno, Dante comes to the gates of hell and he looks up and he sees a motto emblazoned over the gates of hell. Does anybody remember what it says? Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Great advice for a yogi. But it doesn't put us in hell. It puts us in nirvana. Can you come into the now? This is it. Can you give up all need for it to be different than it is right now? Let go. Now, there's a kind of hope that's good. If you're a mumukshu and you're a beginner on the path, some of us, especially Indians suffer from this more than Westerners. Oh, self-realization isn't for me. I'm just an ordinary person, a humble person. I leave that for the great Mahatmas. No, I'm just gonna have a family, get a job. It's not for me. I could never hope for that. Because we have this enormous reverence for the Jivan Mukta. Westerners don't know any better. What's this enlightenment shmamaiman? Well, let me check it out. But we don't come into it with the preconceived ideas, the great cultural baggage that Indians have that can be an impediment. You will not gain self-realization unless you believe that it's possible for you. Do you get that? That's not saying it's going to happen. But if you believe, I can't have it, I'm not worthy, I'm too gross, I'm of the wrong caste, I'm of the wrong gender, my mind's too worldly, nothing will happen. Any thoughts on this? So that's a good kind of hope. All right, next verse.
Manasi gatitha pasha trishnamoha madadayah manasaiva manachindi sansara bhranti shantaye shalayanti male naiva malam kshala kakovidaha. The snares or cords of desire, delusion, pride, and the like are strung on the mind. Cut off or destroy the mind with the mind alone for the alleviation of the confusion of worldly existence. People skilled in washing wash off dirt only with dirt.
So, when I was in Siddhabari in 1988, we used to have meals served. We'd be sitting down and there would be a banana leaf and they would put the food on the banana leaf. But then for some meals, we would have a thali or we would have a metal glass. And when the meal was over, we all had to go clean these metal dishes. And we would use ash to get the grease off and stuff like that. You're probably too young to remember stuff like this. Did they do any of this sort of stuff when you were a boy?
Yeah, they did.
Ash is dirt. So you'd use the dirt to clean off the dirt. So I did laundry yesterday. I take my dirty clothes downstairs. They have dirt in them. Before I put the clothes in the washing machine, Tide Pods. Detergent is dirt, but it's special dirt. It's a dirt that removes dirt. So the jnana vritti, jnana abhyasa, thoughts of truth, the practice of truth, removes the afflicting, covering thoughts. What's the process? We had a very basic level when we were doing Yoga Sutra on Saturday. If I've got habituated negative thought, I engage in thought replacement. Oh, my life is terrible. I'm never going to be happy. And that's just a struggle. No. Find something for which to be grateful. Remember God's in charge. Serve another person. Remember these thoughts. Practice the yamas and niyamas. Later on, as the mind gets a little more quiet, we have another thought. Koham. Who am I? What is my essential nature? I send my mind in a particular kind of thinking. I am not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts, I'm not the evil sense. Oh, I'm the witnessing consciousness over and over and over again. What is this world? It's not material, it's not causing my mind states. It's essentially neutral. What is it? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. For names and forms are illusion. I practice this. Meditate, meditate. We renounce our attachment to all enjoyments gained through the senses. Doesn't mean we don't enjoy the world. Don't be attached to it. I renounce identification with any form of self. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded. Let it go. Till finally we start to take on the practice. I cannot think a real thought. All mind states, all thoughts, all beliefs are illusory, including the thought I just thought it. Where I renounce the mind itself. It is the mind itself that renounces its own existence. Swamiji used to say the mind commits harakiri, psychic suicide. This is the process. In the end, the scripture isn't real. The guru isn't real. My bondage isn't real. Liberation isn't real. Nothing in the world of name and form. I'm doing Mandukya Upanishad with the Gaudapada Karika with a student. And we're in the second chapter, Vaidhatya, falseness. Where Gaudapada over and over again compares the dream state to the waking state to show us that the waking state is just as much an illusion as the dream. He says in the fourth Karika, the phenomenal world, like the dream, is equally unreal. And the proof of its unreality is that you can see it. We start off, seeing is believing. Reality is what I see in front of my own eyes. He says, oh, actually, that's not very valid a proof at all. What's real is that which is never subject to negation. It doesn't exist in the beginning, and it exists for a while, and then doesn't exist in the end. Then it really has no real existence. What is it that always is? Myself. Everything else, nitya. Including all my thoughts. Next verse.
Jivasya trini rupani sthulam sukshmam tatha param panipadam ayo yoyam deho bhogaya vartate bhogartham eta jivasya sthulam rupam ihastitam. There are three forms of a living being: the gross, the subtle, and the highest or transcendental. This body consists of hands and feet, which exists for enjoyment, is the gross form of the living being or the individual soul. This is for the sake of its experiencing the objects and is not firm or fixed here in this world.
So here we're getting a little bit of spiritual anatomy. The first level he talks about is the stula sharira, the gross body with hands and limbs. It is that which makes contact with the gross world of name and form. And it's impermanent, it's always changing, its experiences are finite. All I say to people, none of us here are kids, go look at a photo of yourself as a teenager. Where did that body go? Gone. Its existence in the world, name and form, is so short. Just blink your eyes and the whole life is gone. Next verse.
Swasankalpamaya yavat sansara bhaviyat chittam tat vidhi sukshmakhyam rupam tyasyati vahikam. Know that chitta, or the mind stuff, which manifests as the thinking mind, the intellect which analyzes and decides, and the sense of I as the subtle form of the living being, or the individual soul, passing to other bodies on the extinction of the present one, of the nature of one's thoughts or ideation, and existing as long as there is the course of worldly existence.
So this is the antakarana, the inner equipment. This is the jivatman, as it's termed in some scriptures, also known as the sukshma sharira, the transmigrating soul. What is it? It's comprised of the 5 organs of action, the 5 organs of knowledge. Wait a minute, that sounds physical. You have them in the dream state. The prana, they move around. Manas, mind. Buddhi, intellect. Chitta, the stuff of mind, memory, the capacity to attend to this and to that. It has ahankriti, the ego sense. And in this particular frame, it does not distinguish between the sukshma sharira and the karana sharira. We put them together. It also means our bundle of vasanas, which impel us from incarnation to incarnation. Easiest way to explain it. The stula sharira is like the glass. The sukshma sharira is like the liquid in the glass. I can pour the liquid from one glass into another. That's called reincarnation. But you are like the space in the glass. I drink all the water and break the glass. What happens to the space? Nothing. Next verse.
Adhyantara hitam satyam chinmatram nirvikalpakam yattat vidhi param rupam shuddham jivasya raghava purve dve samparityajya pare baddha pado bhava. Raghava, know that to be the highest form of the living being, or the individual soul, which is pure, without beginning and end, real, the one pure consciousness, and devoid of distinction, such as the knower and the known. Abandoning the former two, be one whose step or position is firmly rooted in the highest or the transcendental.
I'm not the body, I'm not the prana, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the ego sense, I'm not even the darkness of deep sleep, the ana, the maya kosha. And the Shishya says to the Guru, oh Guruji, after having negated all that, there's nothing left. Who am I? You are that consciousness by which everything is known. You are that consciousness that pervades all these gross and subtle layers, because you know. You are that beyond which there is nothing to know. Chidananda Rupa, your form is bliss consciousness. How do I know it? It is Swayambhu, self-evident. The instrument for knowing the self is the self itself. It's not something gained. If you could gain it, you could lose it. When are you ever not you? Sanguham, 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 punata, Satchidananda Rupam, aham evaham avyaya. Unattached, unattached, unattached am I again and again. I am of the form of pure existence, pure consciousness, this absolute. I am what I am. Beautiful. Don't believe me. Maybe you're a little gray ball with wings. Maybe you're a flame the size of the thumb in the heart. That's what the Upanishad says in the Upasana section. Be ruthless in your investigation. Who are you? What are you? Go there and find out. Next verse.
Ya swachha samata shanta jivan muktavya vasthitihi sakshya vastha vyavahritao turya sa parikirtaye kirtate. That very clear identity with the Supreme Spirit, which is the tranquil settlement in the state of liberation while living, and the state of witness in action, that is remaining as a conscious witness while engaged in action, never for a moment falling from the state of identity with the Supreme Spirit, is declared to be the Turiya state.
So the Turiya, the fourth plane, here he means that person who's Sthita Prajna, a person of steady wisdom. Meaning, I never forget I am consciousness. Aham Brahmasmi. I'm not the body. I'm not the subtle body. Listen carefully. I'm not an enlightened person either. The Zen Buddhists have a saying, if you meet the Buddha on the path, kill him. If you think you know something significant, who is it who thinks he knows it? Kill him. All right, we'll end here. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari